Hello, my name is Emily Crow, and the name of my presentation is Preserving the Hashtag, an Approach to Capturing a Moment in Time. I'm going to be discussing the topic of hashtag curation as one approach to preserving Twitter and social activism. An overview, I'll introduce the topic, discuss archiving Twitter and its challenges, hashtag curation as one approach, 2 case studies, and my conclusions. My interest in this topic came after reading an essay last semester entitled Preserving the Voices of Revolution, examining the creation and preservation of a subject-centered collection of tweets from the 18 Days in Egypt. This article uses a case study on the 2011 revolution in Egypt to examine how best to collect a subject-centered collection of tweets. I then looked into more recent case studies and learned about how hashtag curation can play a role in Twitter's preservation. So hashtag curation refers to gathering tweets that feature particular hashtags for a research purpose. So why should the archival community want to preserve Twitter? It is becoming an increasingly important part of international discourse and plays a role in politics, finance, and popular culture. It has become part of our digital heritage and will be of value to researchers. Important events have begun or been extensively documented on Twitter, and anyone and everyone can have a Twitter account. However, there are some challenges. Firstly, Twitter is a private company, and there is the concern that using Twitter's APIs to conduct research may lead to bias. Also, tweets can get deleted or contain links and images that will no longer be accessible. There are also legal issues related to copyright and privacy. Furthermore, each tweet is a JSON file with a large amount of metadata, with archives needing a new department or staff to go through it all. In addition, Twitter continues to expand, with the amount of tweets ever increasing, which became too much even for the Library of Congress. In 2010, Twitter donated all of its public tweets to the Library of Congress. However, this collection was never made available to the public. By 2017, the project and sheer number of documents became overwhelming, and the library decided to no longer archive tweets. Instead, they decided to only collect tweets of historical importance and use what they had archived as a snapshot of a young form of communication. Regardless of these problems, archivists are developing methodologies, metadata standards, and determining how to apply the OAIS reference model to preserving Twitter. One such method is hashtag archiving or hashtag curation. Hashtag curation can be particularly valuable when attempting to create a collection of subject-centered tweets concerning a specific event or movement. It can also be useful when examining so-called hashtag activism, which is a social media phenomenon where the intensive use of a single or group of related hashtags is used to build up public support on social media for affirmative social political changes. This quote here points out how powerful hashtags can be during social movements and that they can amplify marginalized voices who are speaking together. In order to archive hashtags after the fact, researchers often use web scraping tools. Twitter offers multiple APIs, which stands for Application Programming Interfaces. These are programs developed and maintained by Twitter through which one piece of software can request data from Twitter's software, i.e. scraping for a search term. However, the amount of tweets scraped is limited, private tweets can't be searched for, and it is not clear whether this API prioritizes certain tweets, which is significant when looking for activism hashtags. Some libraries, such as the National Library of France, use selective crawls in order to catch particular news event hashtags, which can then be archived, but these are more reactionary and the strategy has shifted to automated collection. The difference between quantitative and qualitative research is relevant in terms of using hashtags to archive Twitter, and the case studies in my presentation represent both approaches. Quantitative research is the process of collecting and analyzing numerical data. It can be used to find patterns and averages, make predictions, test causal relationships, and generalize results to wider populations. This approach is about the number, statistics, and using those to form your conclusions. Qualitative research, on the other hand, is research that involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data, for example, text, video, or audio, to understand concepts, opinions, or experiences. It can be used to gather in-depth insights into a problem or generate new ideas for research. This approach can be more subjective and about interpretation. There is an interesting debate about which of these is the best approach, which I came across when studying the field of digital humanities. In that field, a quantitative approach to literary analysis might use text mining, while qualitative would be about using critical reading skills. However, one should note that you don't have to pick one or the other. It is possible to combine these two approaches. This is relevant with hashtag archiving, since one would have to begin with a quantitative approach by using some type of program in order to collect subject-centered tweets from such a large dataset. The analysis that comes after would ideally be qualitative when attempting to select tweets for the archive. The following case studies are similar in two major respects in that they both discuss hashtag curation and focus on hashtags associated with social movements. One on hashtag Stop Asian Hate and the other on hashtags connected to Black Lives Matter. However, they take two very different approaches to developing this methodology, with one taking a qualitative approach while the other is quantitative. The first study is entitled Stop Asian Hate, Archiving and Analyzing Twitter Discourse in the Wake of the 2021 Atlanta Spa Shootings. Hashtag Stop Asian Hate is a social movement that advocated for an end to anti-Asian sentiments, which came in response to the 2021 Atlanta Spa shootings and discrimination during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since this report was presented to the Association of Information Science and Technology, the essay takes the quantitative approach. However, the abstract does mention that their examination of frequently used hashtags can be applied to archival studies, along with socio-political analysis. The project began with their creation of the Counter Anti-Asian Hate Twitter archive, beginning with their scraping of the Twitter API for the phrase Stop Asian Hate. However, much of the paper discusses their analysis of the 350 other keywords they found hashtagged within those tweets in their archive. The chart here shows where they have matched particular hashtags as representing different types of action or influence and created by different types of users. For example, under advocating action, a specific advocate tweet would be one referring to a GoFundMe or coming out against racist comedy routines, while a general advocate tweet would just use broader hashtags. Another major aspect of this report is looking at the importance of influencers in a social movement, since they are some of the loudest voices on Twitter. So this pie chart here shows their findings that most of the influencers using the hashtag were AAPI, and there were far more general advocate tweets than specific ones. Based on their data, the authors stress the importance of influencers, but do not go into interactions between users or how often various tweets were liked or retweeted. Therefore, it is difficult to determine what role Twitter as a form of communication is playing in this movement based on this data. However, they did track frequency of domestic versus international tweets, and that this domestic movement went global partially because of its presence in the US, as well as the internationality of the topic. This study, which is in its early stages, used the Twitter API with a scraping rate of only 1%, and they have not gone beyond analyzing hashtags, so the text of the tweets themselves have not been examined. We may, as archivists who want to use preservation to analyze past events, want to see those tweets and find out which hashtags interacted with each other. Questions remain about what do these hashtags and their frequency say about the Stop Asian Hate movement and its preservation of online social movements in general. And while this report does not look to make those assessments, the second case study does want to tackle those questions. The second report is entitled Reshaping Public Memory Through Hashtag Curation, which was published in a special issue of the journal across the disciplines called Unsettling the Archives. This study comes out of Texas Christian University and narrows down its data set by focusing on the hashtag being minority at TCU, which resulted in a set of 430 tweets. This essay discusses many specific events at the university that the authors feel speak to institutional racism and several events relating to the suppression of student voices on campus, which I won't go into, but I encourage people to read the essay to learn more. It is important to note that these researchers did not want to use Twitter's API as they felt that Twitter's algorithms may prioritize certain tweets. Their overarching thesis is, by tracing local hashtags born out of institutional racism, we view digital archives as an opportunity for both archivists, ourselves, and users to reflect, process, and move towards change together. The focus here is on reinforcing the digital archive as a true representation of student experiences and using hashtag curation to do so. The article features these two tweets as representing the image the institution presents, which is supporting Black Lives Matter. However, 2 hours later, a student replies with a powerful condemnation of the university's inaction and disinterest in its minority students. By including these two tweets in the digital archives, which one could only do by tracking the hashtag being minority at TCU, the student's story can be represented and the institutional one is exposed. Due to its qualitative approach, this case study is more big picture and theoretical. The essay consistently mentions the idea of a counter story, which those two tweets posted side by side would be an example of. The essay uses Tara Yoss's definition: critical race counter storytelling is a method of recounting the experiences and perspectives of racially and socially marginalized people in terms of institutional silence. The researchers argue that preserving counter stories can transform collective memory, and against the idea that tweets are too personal or casual to be collected as valid documentation. In fact, the proliferation of the being minority at TCU hashtag took work from student activists who knew how powerful that Twitter discourse could be. Also, ignoring these tweets reinforces a biased, racist archival system that privileges certain types of communication. This qualitative approach, unlike the previous case study, examines not just the hashtags used, but the text of the tweets themselves. It also looks at interactions between them to preserve a discourse that may otherwise have been forgotten about. My takeaways are that the preservation of Twitter is a massive task that the digital preservation community is still struggling with. Both cited studies are very recent and acknowledge that their dataset is still only representative. The TCU study brings up temporality as a challenge, as well as obsolescence and the loss of context in terms of links and images. They directly acknowledge my other conclusion that hashtag curation is not enough in the attempt to document Twitter. It is only one part of the evolving methodologies. Furthermore, as social movements continue to thrive online via hashtags, they and the dialogue they represent must be preserved in the digital archive. The reason we all recognize phrases such as Me Too or Black Lives Matter can be partially attributed to their prevalence online and their power to unite marginalized voices. Finally, the debate surrounding quantitative versus qualitative research continues, which is clear when looking at these two case studies. However, both can be used in research to complement each other and must be combined when attempting to use hashtag curation as a Twitter archiving methodology going forward. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and here are my references.